The original Matrix trilogy is a spectacular. Honestly, the older I get, the more I love these movies. When you're a kid, you're just there for the leather trench coats and bullet time. But as you grow up, you start to grasp the nuances, the underlying messages, the deeper truths. And for me personally, those films completely opened my mind to the new possibilities and shifted how I view the world around me. But then we got Matrix Resurrections, and it felt like a complete 180. The logical foundation, the deep philosophical weight, the execution, it all just lost what made The Matrix special. The way they brought characters back felt forced. The stakes were gone, and the narrative meta commentary completely derailed the lore. It just wasn't ideal. I honestly believe they should have taken a completely different approach. And that's exactly why we're here today. We are completely retconning Resurrections. We're tossing out the meta commentary, cranking the stakes up to a lethal high, and charting a brand new route across a massive new trilogy into three distinct chapters of a modernized yet repetitive simulation. Now let's break it down. Chapter 1, Matrix Rebirth. When the Sentinels finally stopped, humanity thought they had won. A century of absolute terror was just evaporating into the dark, and everyone wanted to believe it, especially Niobe. She desperately wanted to believe Morpheus's vision, this beautiful idea that true peace had finally arrived and the war was finally over. But as the decades roll on, the celebration starts to feel like a trap. The human council gets complacent, telling everyone to just look forward. But Niobe, she's a soldier. She can't shake this rotting gut feeling that something is fundamentally wrong. She doesn't have all the facts or proof yet, but she looks at the numbers and notices something terrifying. In a world that's supposed to be at peace, the rate of minds being freed from the system haven't skyrocketed. It's ground to an absolute halt. And we as the audience get to see exactly why Niobe's gut instinct is right. Right after the war ended, we see the machines taking Neo's broken body. But cutscene, his mind is brought face to face with the original architect, and the stakes are immediately made clear. The architect tells Neo that because of his choices, the current Matrix is completely deteriorating. If it collapses, every single human that's still plugged into the system will instantly die. And if the humans die, the machines will eventually starve and die out too. The architect looks at Neo and lays out the cold reality. Your physical body is finished. You're in a permanent vegetative state, but your mind is still alive. So here's the deal. You take over. You become the new architect. Build off my existing source code and run the system your way. You can still let minds be freed if they choose. It's a win-win. Neo thinking about the survival of every remaining human soul and still believing in the power of free will, he agrees with the terms. But this is where the architect's true cynical brilliance comes in. He didn't trick Neo with a lie. He tricked him with his own empathy. The architect knew that if you give a human like Neo the keys to build an entire society, he's going to design a world that is comfortable, modern, and accommodating. Neo updates the simulation into a sleek 2020s 2030s reality, thinking that he's giving them a better life. But in doing so, he accidentally creates a world so enticing and full of illusionary choice that the humans never want to leave. He wanted to save them, but he ended up building the ultimate cage. And to make matters worse, a small, jagged fragment of that original cyclical source code is left behind at the bedrock. The seed of history repeating itself is already planted, and Neo has no idea. Now, fast forward 50 odd years later, and humanity has completely forgotten what a sentinel even sounded like. But here's the real kicker about this new era of humanity. They don't even need the machines to trap them anymore. The people within the city have essentially built their own psychological matrix right here in the real world. They wanted comfort so badly that they have willingly blinded themselves to reality. To them, the fact that no new minds are being freed doesn't even matter. The world outside their city borders doesn't matter. It's a bubble of absolute denial just to feel safe, operating on a total everything is awesome kind of mindset. And that brings us to our new protagonist, Wen. She's the granddaughter of Morpheus and Niobe, born completely free in the real world with no ports on her body. She grew up on the myth of her grandfather, and thanks to Niobe, she's inherited that absolute refusal to take the artificial paradise at face value. She wants real answers. Now, not to add a whole lot of exposition to this pitch, Niobe, along with Wen, assemble a whole new crew of misfits traveling around in a refurbished Logos. On the ship is a tight-knit crew of 3 young adults who happen to be Wen's closest friends. They practically grew up on Niobe's stories and agreed that something about this perfect society felt completely off, which forces them to find answers for themselves, navigating the dark territories to find the right frequency. They're trying to practically reconnect to the Matrix, but at this point they haven't discovered yet that they don't have the connection anymore. Now, among the 3 friends, you have a top-tier tech genius running the deck, a brilliant engineer who practically grew up in the ship's engine room, and a history buff who is essentially a Neo fanboy, obsessed with the lore of the old war. Now, they're constantly moving around at first because Niobe's relying on the old school playbook. Back in her prime, ships had to constantly stay on the move to broadcast their pirate signals while evading sentinels. In this new era, they don't have to worry about sentinel attacks as long as they stay clear of the machine cities, but they have to travel because they can't catch a clean signal. Every time they try to link up, they just hit a wall of static. They are quite literally driving around the wasteland trying to get the bunny ears right. But sending out those high frequency pirate broadcasts catches attention. It alerts exiled machines on the surface, machines that acted as physical avatars for hidden programs. One of these avatars approaches the Logos and connects to their systems, typing out an on-screen text to deliver a chilling warning. What the humans are trying to do is impossible. The program explains that the original Matrix source code was completely purged when a new architect created a brand new system. Because of that, anyone born before this new code was written is fundamentally incompatible. They physically can't jack in. Niobe is completely stunned, demanding to know who this new architect is, but the program refuses to say because revealing the name risks getting them instantly hunted down and purged out of the system themselves. Not only that, but this program never even reveals its identity, leaving that massive reveal for later. But to make sure Niobe actually listens, it drops a line of text that stops her heart. It prints out the exact words that the original Oracle told her decades ago during the machine war. You will have a choice, Niobe, and your choice will either help the one or destroy us all. Seeing those exact words on screen 50 years later instantly brings Niobe back to the moment she gave Neo her ship to save Zion. It deepens the connection entirely. Niobe realizes that whoever is behind this machine interface knows exactly who she is, what she did for Neo, and that the plan that they're about to give them isn't a trap. It's the next choice that has to be made by the new one. The Avatar offers the solution, an experimental surgery to give Wen synthetic ports that might just bypass the compatibility lock. Wen accepts and they initiate the surgery. Towards the end, she ends up blacking out and they accidentally drift just a little too close to one of the Machine City borders, triggering a brutal sentinel response. They swarm the Logos, completely ground the ship. However, the rules of the truce here, the machines don't kill the crew. The only thing they do is obliterate the rogue machine that performed the surgery. Wen finally wakes up, she sees her mechanical savior in pieces and is genuinely bothered by the loss. She also looks down at her arms. The synthetic ports are there. With the ship completely grounded and the machines gone, they have nothing left to lose. They plug her in, but instead of jumping right into the live Matrix, she goes through an archived training program left behind by her own grandfather. It was meant to be a welcome to the new era as far as those who were still being freed after the war. The second she jacks in, she finds herself in that white void, and standing right there is an AI manifestation of Morpheus himself. And just for a little scientific detail that I personally love, he isn't de-aged. He's aged in real time with the real world, just to keep a human comfort level within that program. It's a deeply emotional moment. He recognizes her brainwaves, looks at her and says, "I haven't seen you since you were a baby. You look like your grandmother." It is really a heartbreaking moment, but they have to carry on. When he tries to give her the standard speech about what the Matrix is, Wen interrupts him and tells him the brutal truth. That's what the Matrix used to be. Nobody can jack in anymore though. Morpheus is stunned, but he knows the protocol. They launch into a high-octane training montage. The dojo, The leap of faith, the tactical weapons training, preparing Wen for a reality she doesn't understand yet. And when she finally comes back out, the crew realizes the procedure was a flawless success. Her vitals were perfectly normal, so now it's time for the real thing. They boot up the system to try to jack into the actual live matrix. After the updates that the machine gave before the surgery, the resident tech kid yells out, "The matrix is live! We're live now!" But Niobe looks at the screens and goes cold. The source code isn't green. It's completely unrecognizable because we're now seeing the matrix not through the old architect's eyes, but through Neo's. So we're given an amber looking matrix when looking at the raw source code. When jacks in and the transition is instant and heavy. Her vision starts glitching, flashing with waves of amber code, a direct reflection of how the blinded Neo saw the real world, carrying his perspective into the architecture of the new reality. She doesn't realize that she's the new anomaly yet. She chalks it up to glitches from her experimental ports. Inside the simulation, Wen is tracking glimpses of a faint, blurry figure in the background. Somebody's watching her like a ghost across the street. When following it, she notices that she's actually being guided to an old apartment. Outside of the apartment, we see a brand new Seraph protector. But with everything in life, there is an upgrade. In the room that Seraph leads her to, we see a whole new figure, a brand new oracle. And as she turns around, shock and disbelief, as it's revealed to be Trinity. Trinity isn't as cryptic as the old oracle, but she does deliver a powerful philosophical truth. You will always make the same choice. You just need to understand why. Trinity knows that Neo is the new architect, but she doesn't understand why minds aren't being freed. She gives Wen a direct message to take back to Niobe, setting both sides on a collision course to find the truth. To get answers about this mystery, Niobe takes a repaired Logos and crew to a secondary hidden human city filled with survivalists and conspiracy theorists who never believed the machine's piece was real. And this is where we run into another kid named Aaron, a hardened street kid whose parents died trying to infiltrate machine cities. When Niobe sees him, we get a perfect yin-yang effect to Wen's introduction. Niobe looks at Aaron and tells him, "I haven't seen you since you were born, but your eyes look just like his." She's talking about Morpheus. Wen and Aaron are cousins. Now again, not to put too much exposition into this story, but Niobe and Morpheus had 2 kids. Those 2 kids got married. One had Wen, the other had Aaron. Now Wen's parents were bubblists. We'll just call them that. They stayed in the city and they were completely fine and content with the so-called freedom that they thought they were in. Aaron's parents were obviously conspiracists, which drew the divide within the family, causing the separation. Them being cousins coming from the opposite sides of the same coin really starts to bridge their narrative together. Aaron holds a massive prejudice against machines because they killed his parents, but at the same time, he's deeply envious of Wen's ports. But because he knows the terrain and how to slip inside of machine cities or around them without detection, he joins the Logos as their final crew member and guide. With the team locked in, Wen takes a second dive into the Matrix to push further. But during this dive, she accidentally interacts with a random citizen who is one of few people who felt something is fundamentally wrong with this reality, but had no idea how to interpret it. Without even meaning to, Wen's anomaly code overrides the system and triggers a forced disconnect. She accidentally frees his mind. This first movie in the trilogy will end on a sci-fi horror cliffhanger. We cut to the real world. Inside a pink machine pod, a man's eyes snap open. He gasps, violently pulls the breathing tube out of his throat, and looks out over a sea of billions, maybe even trillions, of trapped human souls. The system is fractured. For the first time in over 50 years, a mind has been forcefully unplugged. And this is how we go into Matrix Resurrections. Now hear me out. I know I just said we're retconning Resurrections, but our version of Chapter 2 is a completely different beast.